Let's just start with Juneteenth. Obviously, became a federal holiday a few years ago, but something that's been celebrated, at least in the Black community, for a very long time. What is the significance to you and the individuals you work with and serve, as evidenced by today?
So number one, I think it honors you know, the freedom for people of color, and it really marked the day that the last enslaved people in the U.S. Um, really learned that they were actually free. And so we want to really celebrate that and bring honor to that, while making sure that uh, we keep the eye focused on things like justice in our community and equality. Because while we're celebrating, there is a lot more work to be done.
How much progress would you say has happened since then in America?
So I don't know if I would say there is any progress. What we actually see is a regression of what would say was so-called progression. We're wiping away history that is or was in history books. We're eliminating funding opportunities for programs that really tell the story about said, enslaved individuals and the history that revolves around Black people and our culture. And so I don't know if we could say that there's actually progress. I would actually argue that we're seeing more of a regression than progress.
What impact does that history have? Like you said, the history that's been sort of put on the chopping block on society.
So I think it really helps individuals understand trauma that Black communities not only have faced but face, but the history also helps you gain an understanding of where we came from, and possibly where we're going. And if you delete that, then how do we remember where we came from? How do our kids live on to tell the story and know the truth about slavery, and the various different issues that have prevailed here in America?
Since I just mentioned since 2021, became a federal holiday. I don't know if you want to say this, but it probably expanded to maybe a new audience, right? A new group of people that obviously had the day off, federal holiday or whatever, or maybe more awareness to it. Have you seen an impact in that at all? The expansion of this beyond just something the Black community is celebrating once it was acknowledged at the federal level that this was something for everyone?
So I'm going to say, Tom, that I think it has actually become more performative than it is about the history. I truly think, and we were talking about this yesterday in a discussion, where we see, you go into like a Target or a Walmart and you see the selling of products. You see organization hosting events around Juneteenth. And to be honest, I think that when that happens, while it is reaching a new audience, we are really taking away from the true message around Juneteenth and its history. And I think it risks us watering it down so that it becomes like just another normal holiday where somebody gets the day off, and it becomes, let's say Christmas or Thanksgiving, where the purpose of Juneteenth is really to hone in on the true history and allowing people to understand Juneteenth, where it came from, how it was devised, how it affects us currently, and what the past was.
What would be a better way to frame it then in this day and age?
Well, I think, and I don't know if it would be a better way to frame it, but I think that we have to do better at using the word celebrate. Because some people would say this isn't necessarily a celebration, but it's more of an understanding of history. And it's important that we understand again that Juneteenth really marked the day the last enslaved people lived in the U.S. or were in the U.S. And even then, that's not necessarily true. In other parts of the country, there were still laws where it allowed people of color to be enslaved. And so um, we really want to talk about the history and not water it down so much, and really utilize it as an educational piece.
So you take that and you add the layer of, the systemic issues that have come since then, right? Even since the proclamation, if you will, and addressing that, even when that comes to redlining neighborhoods, things of that nature. How do you want even today what happened? Today's acknowledgement of this to help propel change to policy and things of that nature. What do you want to accomplish through that? How do you want people to use this as almost a motivation?
Well, I think education is important, or as we say, knowledge is power. And so when you have the education of something, especially when that education is fact and not opinion, uh, you have the ability to use that information to make smart and correct choices. And when we delete history, it's only because you know that the information that is out there is actually true. And so, I think that we have the opportunity through history to really make profound change, and not just change that is surface level change, right? And you've heard me talk about that before. Not just passing laws and marginalized or for marginalized communities to get the vote, but really passing them and legislation to ensure that communities have a long-term opportunity, especially communities of color, to thrive and be successful.
Where are you seeing that falling short right now?
So I think we see that falling short still in the criminal justice system. We know that there's issues currently in the Department of Corrections. We see that in the ability for people to obtain housing. We see that in the ability for people to go out and obtain employment. We see this in so many different sectors. We see this in education. We know that in education for kids of color, the type of education is different for kids who live in suburban neighborhoods. And so we see this in multi different sectors and facets. And unfortunately, I don't think we see any positive change coming anytime soon, especially as we see the current climate, which is working to eliminate the truth and how people of color were enslaved at one time.
Do you think New York State has an opportunity here to make a statement? Because I think a lot of people have been asking for that. With in a state that is, the Democratic majority, as a Democratic governor, we're in Albany, a Democratic mayor. Do you think that it's on them a bit to help at least counteract some of those things going on at the federal level?
So I would say yes, but I would also say that we have a lot of our leaders who overpromise and underdeliver. As I said at the community roundtable yesterday, we need to do a lot more listening to members of our community who are living in areas that are marginalized and underserved. And I think that that's really how government can start, right? And not taking things personal in the sense that if someone says, hey, listen, I've lived in this neighborhood for 20 years and it has been the same way where we've seen no investment and no true resource, um, political leaders have to listen first and then utilize the information and the people that they're listening to help create change. And I think when we start doing that, we'll see change. But in the current state where uh, our political leaders are not always open to listening and hearing and understanding and being empathetic, we're going to see the same thing. We're going to see legislation written that falls through. Right? We see it with things like the Discovery Law and the Holt Act and all of these different things where we write in the beginning and we celebrate it, we champion it, and then we get to 5, 6 years down the line and it was really only written as a skeleton with no real thought to make it sustainable in the future. And then
Yeah.
that has a profound and negative effect on communities of color.
Yeah, I mean that was found. I mean the HALT Act was found independently. You could say by the Inspector General did a report recently saying this hasn't been implemented, and you could say this like you could go on, raise the age, just like you said, discovery. With all this in mind, though, what does give you hope at this time?
So what gives me hope is that I think we and I don't even know if it's hope I would frame it as, is I think we just have this opportunity now, understanding where we are in this current climate, that as a community of people of color, we have to be more unified and we have to come together. And so hopefully Juneteenth, through education and history, and having knowledge, which is power, will help us to march on and to, as Dr. Green would say, fight through the struggle, because that's how we're going to really overcome the challenges and the systemic barriers and the trauma that we see in our neighborhoods.
Okay, Sean, thanks for the time. Appreciate it.